Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Bible in 1 year with the Preacher's Husband. Today we are getting through Leviticus chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we have just finished Exodus, and Leviticus essentially is a book of laws. And the laws can be divided into two groups. The first groups of laws are commands, and they can be either positive or negative. In other words, you must do this and you must not do that. And then the second type of law are like case laws, where they share like an example of what to do if such and such happens, and what you should do if this happens, or what you shouldn't do when this happens. And then also God gave other civil laws, moral laws, and ceremonial laws as well to his people, so they'll know how to live holy lives in the community. So let's get started. Right off the bat in Leviticus, we're starting out with, it mentions the tent of meeting. The tent of meeting, that refers to the tabernacle tent. Remember the tabernacle tent right there where the cloud was over? That's the tent of meeting that they're referring to now, not the temporary one that was just used for Moses to go and listen to. Okay, this is the tabernacle tent that we're talking about here. And we get into all the different kinds of burnt offerings. There are actually 5 different kinds of regular offerings that were done. There was a burnt offering, a grain offering, a fellowship offering, a sin offering, and a guilt offering. The first 3 were voluntary gifts, and the last 2 were required. The burnt offering was for the general, non-specific sinfulness of the offerer. So the burnt offering was also known as the whole burnt offering because it was totally consumed on the altar, except for the hide, of course. They didn't need to eat the skins. Expressing the person's total dedication to God is what it was doing. Since it was so commonly associated with the altar of sacrifice, the altar itself was sometimes called the altar of the burnt offerings. The next offering was a grain offering, and that was where the worshiper acknowledged God as the source of provision and prosperity. And this could be offered raw, cooked, ground into flour, or in baked forms, because essentially they're offering grains and not a burnt offering. Now sometimes it could be accompanied by a burnt offering of meat of some sort, but typically it could be presented independently as well. The next one was the fellowship sacrifice, or the fellowship offering, as they would call it. And there were 3 kinds of fellowship sacrifices here. It's not just one, it's 3 different kinds. They were thanksgiving, vow, and free will. So there was a thanksgiving fellowship sacrifice, a vow fellowship sacrifice, and a free will fellowship sacrifice. Now the fellowship offering, it signified communion between the worshiper and God, because it was the only sacrifice in which the worshiper actually ate and shared the meal with the priests after it was all said and done. So that's the interesting note about the fellowship offering. And then, of course, the sin offering. The traditional translation, sin offering, is better understood as a purification offering of sorts. And since it really involved ritual removal of impurities and provided forgiveness for this. The sin offering addressed the consequences of sin, which always rendered the sanctuary and its furnishings unclean and impaired the relationship between the worshiper and God. If you read through here, chapter 4, you notice that the priest dips his finger into blood and sprinkles some of it 7 times before the Lord in front of the curtain of the sanctuary. And they apply some blood to the horns of the altar of the fragrant incense. And then he pours the rest of the bull's blood at the base of the altar. It makes a mess. It really does. It just absolutely makes a mess all over everything. So everything's unclean. And that basically represented something that was unacceptable. Basically, a separation. Your relationship with God was dirty, and it was all messed up. The sin offering removed the corrupting effects of sin, which permitted a remorseful sinner not only to receive forgiveness, but to have the assurance of acceptance with God. For this reason, the ritual included the application of blood to the sanctuary furnishings, not to the person themselves, okay? It was to the sanctuary furnishings. Sin offerings varied according to the progressive degrees of responsibility. The underlying principle is that although all sin is contaminating, the sins of leadership, priests and kings and such, and the congregation have greater impact than those of individual transgressors. Let's think about that for a minute. The sins of leaders, priests and kings, and the congregation, God's congregation, has more impact than the transgressions of just individual sinners. It does have more impact, actually, when a leader sins than it does if someone that's just a worker bee sins. It really does, because it affects everyone around him, and it affects everybody the way they see that person, the him or her that committed that sin, that's in a leadership position. So the Bible clearly points that out here as well. Also, I got to thinking, these poor priests, they are sitting here with over 600,000 people. You see all them tents around? And they are basically cooking it up. They must be butchers and chefs, and most of their job had to have been, with that many people, most of their job had to be presenting burnt offerings and helping out with the burnt offering part. I couldn't imagine doing all of that constantly with that many people around in one tabernacle temple, to handle that many people and all the different burnt offerings that they would have to do. I just couldn't imagine. They were pretty much just chef priests at that point. But just an observation from my point of view. Well, what do you think about all this? You think this is definitely defining moments? Are these defining offerings? Tomorrow, we didn't go through all of them. Tomorrow we're going to go through Leviticus chapter 5, 6, and 7, and we will get to the guilt offering. We didn't talk about the guilt offering tonight, so we will talk about the guilt offering tomorrow. Post down in the comments some of the things that you think about what happened today in chapters 1 through 4, and let's discuss it. I hope you have enjoyed this. If you have, give it a share, click the like button, the subscribe button, and click the little jingle bell so you can get notified the next time I upload a video, which will be tomorrow for another episode of the Bible in 1 year with the Preacher's Husband. Adios.